All right, let's dive into Joshua chapter 7. Now, I know this can feel like one of those really tough chapters in the Bible. It's a heavy story of sin, exposure, and pretty severe judgment. But here's the thing, if you lean in and look closely, it's also one of the most hope-filled chapters in the entire Old Testament. It shows us the heart of a God who loves his people way too much to let them live with hidden things.
So the story kicks off right after this incredible, miraculous victory at Jericho. I mean, the walls have literally fallen down, God's power is on full display, and then we hit this one word, but. It's like a hinge, a trapdoor that swings the whole story from this high point of triumph into total tragedy. And that one little word shows you just how quickly things can go wrong when something's festering under the surface.
So, fresh off their amazing win, Israel turns its attention to this tiny little town called Ai. The spies are super confident. They're like, don't even bother sending the whole army. They are expecting another walk in the park. But that's not what happens at all.
The contrast between these two battles is just jarring. At Jericho, walls fell down. At Ai, Israel's army turns and runs away. At Jericho, it was a total victory. At Ai, 36 men are killed in this humiliating defeat. The difference is staggering, and for Joshua, it makes absolutely no sense.
And here's where the Bible's language is so brilliant. It says, the hearts of the people melted and became as water. Does that sound familiar? It should. That's the exact same phrase used to describe the terror of Israel's enemies just a couple chapters before. The very fear they were putting into their enemies has now completely turned back on them.
So Joshua is just devastated. He falls on his face, tears his clothes, and just cries out to God in this raw, honest anguish. And I want you to see God's response here. It's so important. He doesn't shut him down from being honest. No, he meets him right there in his pain and gives him the answer. Get up. Israel has sinned. He's saying, the problem isn't with my power, Joshua. The problem is something hidden right here inside the community. All right, so now God starts to peel back the layers. He begins to reveal the diagnosis. There's a secret sin that has poisoned the entire camp from the inside out, and it has to be brought into the light.
Okay, to really get why this was such a huge deal, we have to talk about this Hebrew idea called herem. Basically, all the plunder from Jericho was devoted to God. It belonged entirely to him as the first fruits of the promised land. So taking it wasn't just, stealing some stuff. It was a deep theological rebellion. It was basically saying, God, thanks for the power. I'll use it to get what I really want for myself.
And when the guilty man, Achan, finally confesses, he lays out what is basically the timeless grammar of every single fall into sin. He says, I saw, I coveted, and I took. It's the exact same pattern as Eve in the Garden of Eden, right? She saw the fruit, she desired it, and she took it. Achan is just replaying the oldest human story. But it's what he took that is so telling. Along with the silver and gold, there was a beautiful cloak from Shinar. Now, Shinar is the biblical name for Babylon, the place of the Tower of Babel. By taking that cloak, Achan was symbolically bringing the spirit of Babel, that spirit of human pride and wanting to make a name for ourselves, and hiding it right in the heart of God's holy camp. So, the hidden thing has been diagnosed, but now it has to be exposed publicly and dealt with. And this leads to a place that will forever be named for the pain and trouble it caused. God tells Joshua to use sacred lots to figure out who the guilty person is. And you can just feel the tension ratchet up. First, the lot falls on the tribe of Judah. Then, from Judah, the clan of the Zerahites is chosen. Then, the household of Zabdi. With each step, the circle just gets smaller and smaller, this slow, public, divine process, until it lands on one man, Achan. And the original Hebrew here is just, wow, it's so powerful. Achan's very name, Achan, sounds almost exactly like the Hebrew word for trouble, which is akar. And Joshua says to him, why have you troubled us? The Lord will now trouble you. And so the place where he's judged is named the Valley of Achor, the Valley of Trouble. The man, his sin, the consequence, the geography, it's all woven together. Now, this next part is tough for us modern readers. His family shares in the consequence. And that's hard for us to hear because we're so individualistic, but it reveals this deep biblical truth. We're not just isolated atoms. We're connected. We're part of a body. And one person's secret sin really does affect the health of the entire community. Okay, I know this all feels incredibly heavy, right? It's a story of sin and judgment and trouble. But this is where the Bible does something completely unexpected. This is where the story takes a turn you would never, ever see coming. It refuses to let the valley of trouble be the last word. Fast forward hundreds of years, God is speaking through the prophet Hosea to his people who have been unfaithful again. And he makes this jaw-dropping promise. I will take the valley of Achor, that very place, that scar on Israel's memory, the place of shame and failure and judgment, and I will transform it into a door of hope. The place of trouble becomes the entryway to restoration.
And that's when we realize Achan's story isn't really just about Achan. It's about us. It's a picture of the human condition. We all have something buried under the tent, don't we? Some secret sin, some Babylonian garment we're hiding in the dark. Achan's problem is our problem. And this is where the whole story just opens up into the gospel. Watch how Jesus comes and reverses every single part of Achan's story. Achan, from the tribe of Judah, brings trouble on his people because of his sin. Jesus, the lion from the tribe of Judah, brings peace by taking our sin on himself. Achan is exposed in the valley of trouble. Jesus is exposed on a cross at Calvary. Achan's death saves his community from immediate judgment. Jesus' death saves everyone from all time who trusts in him.
So how did he do it? Well, the Apostle Paul tells us, God took all of our hidden things, every secret sin, every buried shame, every Babylonian cloak, and he placed it all on Jesus, the only one who had none of his own. Jesus became our Achan in the ultimate valley of trouble, so that we, in him, could become the righteousness of God.
And that's the point, isn't it? The story never ends in the valley. Just like back in Joshua chapter 8, right after the sin is dealt with, God says, "Do not fear, arise, go up to Ai." The mission continues. For us, because our sin was judged on the cross, our relationship with God is restored, and we are set free to move forward in his purpose for us.
And this leaves us with this incredible invitation. Because Jesus stood in the valley for us, we don't have to hide anymore. We can actually bring our hidden things out into the light of his grace. And when we do, we don't find condemnation. We find a God who is faithful and just to forgive us completely and to cleanse us entirely.
So the question this story leaves for you and me is really personal. What's the Babylonian garment? What's the silver or gold you've kept hidden? What is Christ, who has already turned your valley of trouble into a door of hope, inviting you to bring into his loving light today?